So we have week one coming up. Kicking off Thursday is the first game. It's going to be the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos. So we're only a few days away from official kickoff. And what way to start things off with some fantasy pick'em. I'm your host, as always, the commish. I'm going to try to break down some teams, and I know there's a lot of rosters that aren't fully set. So what I'll do from here is I'll break down each matchup. I'll give my insight on what people have already set. What do I think is going to happen? Who do I like in the matchups on their teams? Who I don't like? Just putting in my thoughts in. Obviously, what I say doesn't mean anything, and it is week one, so no expert. Only the NFL coaches know what their game plan is going to be for some of these guys who could break out. I'm just going to give what I think is going to happen. Doesn't mean that it's right. I just think that, being a loyal and faithful commish, I'm going to do some fantasy pick'ems. And this is rivalry week, as always, for week one. But there's a lot of interesting storylines going on for these matchups. And we're going to start off with this game. These two teams, both of them have made a Super Bowl. Ever since they've been to the Super Bowl, they have yet to return to the playoffs. One of these teams has been second and third place in his division with some bad teams since his Super Bowl run. That is Max Mandel taking on somebody who thought that a cruise was more important than a fantasy draft. I'm just kidding, but since Allen's magical Super Bowl run, he has not returned to the playoffs. So both of these teams looking to rebound, looking to have a strong season. They are in the same division. So let's kick things off with the quarterback position. So we have Max Mandel, who's going to go with Carson Palmer. And I believe that Carson Palmer is a viable option against New England at home. He's projected at 21, and I think that's because of the bend but don't break mentality of New England. They're not going to over project for Carson Palmer right here. Palmer, I'd say he's between most. I think he gets like 25 to 28. I'm not sure about a 30-plus point game. I know New England has Garoppolo, but I don't see New England being a team that gets blown out and destroyed. So I think mid-20s is definitely the upside for Palmer in this game. And then you look at Allen's quarterback situation. Kirk Cousins, prime time, Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a really good, especially for DFS players, this is a really good matchup. I think Kirk Cousins, we don't know what Matt Jones' status is. Regardless, even if Matt Jones was there, this is a pass-first team. This is a 70% pass team to 30% run team. So he's going to be airing it out. You have Jordan Reed, who's healthy. You have Deshaun Jackson on the outside against a very leaky Pittsburgh secondary. Pierre Garçon is always a viable option. Kirk Cousins looks like he could ball out, and Kirk Cousins' numbers at home, if you're going to take those numbers from last season, I like them a lot. So for there, I think the matchup is a lot better with Kirk Cousins, but I think both of these quarterbacks are going to score within the same range. And when I do break down these matchups, guys, you're going to see that a lot of quarterback matchups are very hard to predict because they're pretty close, and that just goes to why people wait on quarterbacks is that it's like, you know what? Unless you're getting that 40-point game, it's pretty much even. So now I'm going to just focus on Max's first two wide receivers, and then I'm going to go to Allen's. So Max is rolling with Jordy Nelson and Kelvin Benjamin. Two guys coming off of ACL injuries, and they're both on the same team. Kind of risky if you ask me, but we'll start with Jordy Nelson first. Reports have been, since he's heard a knee scare in the other knee, which was back, I believe, late July, early August. Jordy Nelson now goes up to the road in Jacksonville. So what do I have to say about that? I think it's a really good matchup. If Jordy Nelson is healthy, you got a young Jaguars secondary, but I think it's going to take time for this defense to gel together. Jordy Nelson definitely has big play potential. It's going to be one of those 50-plus yard bombs where Rodgers rolls to the right and finds him on an open post. I can see that happening in this game, so I like the matchup for Jordy Nelson. As for Kelvin Benjamin, this is a guy going in Thursday night and against the Denver Broncos secondary. This is a very, very risky matchup. There's reports coming as of right now saying that he's going to be on a snap count. And you know what? If you look at what Carolina did last season, That's the smartest thing to do. They didn't have any wide receivers that they needed to win games, so why not just ease Benjamin back into full potential? With that being said, though, there's going to be a time where Newton's going to have to take shots because this team likes to play man to man, and you're just going to hope that he wins a jump ball battle somewhere along the line. I don't know if that's possible, though. If you look at the Super Bowl last season, this also brings it with Devin Funchess. The way to beat the Denver Bronco secondary is with these speedy guys. So if there is a receiver to have a big game, I think this is more of a Ted Ginn game because this is a team that plays man to man, and you're hoping one of those speedy guys beats him off the press. Philly Brown actually had a pretty respectable stat line for against an elite secondary. I think the way they use Kelvin Benjamin is kind of like a deep threat bomb. Go up and get the jump ball situation. And with being on a snap count, this is not where I want to roll the dice. However, it is week one, so everybody's under the mentality that I'm just going to go put the guys that I drafted earlier and see how that progresses long term as the season progresses. So I understand why he's in the lineup in Max's team. Obviously, that is subject to change. Okay, so now let's see who wins the matchup. Allen has, if you're a DFS, these two guys could go off this week, and Dante Moncrief and Golden Tate. Both of them play against each other. It is a dome game. This is going to be a shootout. I think Moncrief and Golden Tate combined could get at least 40 points combined. Because of the two amazing matchups that is going on right now, I give the slight edge to Allen in the wide receiver department. However, this is now going on to the running backs where Max is Todd Gurley and Mark Ingram. Now, Todd Gurley's got a. You can't even look at matchups for Todd Gurley at this point because the Rams' offense is just bleh. But it doesn't even matter. It's at San Francisco. This is not a scary matchup. However, for those of you who look at numbers from last year, San Francisco was very, very respectable against the run. They ranked inside the top 10. I don't know if that's kind of an outlier because maybe people were like throwing all over them last year, but it is something to look at for the upcoming season. But with that being said, Gurley is projected at 15. Gurley is a guy who has to rely, in my opinion, on a touchdown to have a serviceable fantasy day. I mean, despite being a workhorse, I think without a touchdown, I think Gurley gets between the 10 to 12 line because he's the whole offense. But then you're going to look at like possibly an 18-point game potential for that. And then Mark Ingram against Oakland. This is another DFS game. This is a lot of shootout potential in this one. Mark Ingram's a guy that doesn't wow anybody with his yards per carry, but the touchdown is always possible. There was a theory that maybe John Kuhn could become the goal line back in New Orleans. I'll believe it until I see it, though. For now, you have Mark Ingram as the goal line back. For now, but the one thing about Mark Ingram is we don't know if the 50-plus catches are going to be there. Now, this is obviously long-term, but for this matchup, we don't know anything. And against the Giants last season, you had Kyrie Robinson, who was just about to be the goal line back. It did not work out. So that is something. But regardless, Allen is probably going to have to start Jeremy Hill and Amir Abdullah as his two running backs. Now, the matchup for Jeremy Hill, I don't like at all against the New York Jets front. I think this is a game for Cincinnati to use Giovanni Bernard, not Jeremy Hill. But Amir Abdullah's got some sneaky potential in the game against Indianapolis. I think Amir Abdullah, as a first and second down back, he still warrants some upside, and the Colts are not a scary matchup at all. But because of the uncertainty with Jamal Charles and the bad matchup with Jeremy Hill, I get the slight edge to Max in the running back department. So we're tied 1-1 as the quarterback situation obviously is even. Now, as far as tight ends are concerned, this is how everybody plays tight ends in this day and age. Everybody doesn't like them, but how do you want to view your tight end? Do you want a guy that's going to go out there and say, oh, I'm just going to take my safe guy who's going to get me that 8 to 10? That's why I think Allen's going to roll with Jason Witten. Or do you want to go with the upside or, shoot for that touchdown and say Clive Walford? I like the move in Clive Walford at New Orleans. This is a defense who was worst. They were terrible, but their worst stat line, in my opinion, was against the tight ends. Tight ends just all day were feasting all over them. Clive Walford, I don't know if he's an established tight end, but he's huge, and I can expect Derek Carr in the red zone to look for him. The stat line was that Michael Crabtree was going to be his guy in the red zone. I also think that Clive Walford can be a decent option. But if you're going to pull the history card out here with Jason Witten against the Giants, he destroys the New York Giants. Whether it's a fantasy productive day or that clutch third down, like both of these matchups are really good, but it's, do you want to go with the floor or do you want to go with the upside? Especially with Dak Prescott being a young quarterback, he's going to look to the tight end. So I believe that the slight edge goes to Allen only because I think Jason Witten is going to be relied on heavily and because of the history card. Although Clive Walford is not a bad option at all, but I give him the slight edge there. Again, we're going to go for flexes, and with a lot of uncertainty with Allen's situation, I'm looking at the bench right now. I see Michael Thomas as a possibility. Devontae Booker is definitely not a possibility, and there is another guy, Devontae Parker. I think there's some guys that you need to be looking at, like or Marcus Wheaton against Washington is a leaky secondary. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but for those guys, Marcus Wheaton against the Redskins, you know what? He's going to see the softest coverage. It's just a shame that his talent isn't that good. Eli Rogers, this is a guy who I watched in the preseason and I could see him having a big role, but this is not a guy you want to roll the dice on in week one. It's a wait and see approach with that. You might as well go with Marcus Wheaton. Antonio Brown's going to get his. It's just a matter of who's going to be the other guy. So that's a coin flip there. Devontae Parker against Seattle, that is a stupid move. I think we all know that. Booker is just a handcuff at this point. And then it brings me to Michael Thomas, which, you know what? He could probably go out for a deep bomb against Oakland. You never know. If I'm looking at the way Allen has his team constructed, I think it's almost a guaranteed lock that Dante Moncrief and Golden Tate will have big games. So why not throw the kill shot dagger with Michael Thomas? That's just my recommendation. You could do whatever the hell you want. And you know what? You might as well play safe with Marcus Wheaton because I don't see any other options. Now, if Jamal Charles does suit up and plays, this makes this situation a lot more difficult. But I'm just going to go with that one. Now we look at Max Mandel, Mr. Max. We have Matt Forte and Jordan Matthews as the flex options. Forte is going to be the starter. I do see this becoming a 60-40 backfield split to begin the season. Forte is going to, for the first time in his career, cede third down looks and 2-minute drills to Bilal Powell. Cincinnati's an average defense. I think Matt Forte, he's projected at 10 points. I think he can score that. Jordan Matthews is interesting because he hasn't been healthy at all. Going against the Cleveland Browns, which is not a scary option at all. We have a young rookie quarterback in Carson Wentz who's probably going to look and rely on Jordan Matthews, Zach Ertz, and probably Darren Sproles in this game. Why? Because they're check down options, and when you're nervous, you're going to throw to whatever's in the middle of the field. So Matthews, I could see having a decent catch game. I don't know about yardage totals there. So with the uncertainty there between both of these guys, I think it's kind of, I give the slight edge for now for Max because you know that those guys are going to play, and we don't know what Allen is doing at his matchup. So that's what I have. Kickers and defenses. You guys know I'm not going to go too much into this. A lot of us don't have kickers at this point. There's no need to break down the kickers, and there's no need to break down the defense. So with that being said, I think you got to go with the guys that are set in stone going to get the workload. And with that being said, this matchup I can see being one of the lowest scoring games this week, which is why I capped it off first. I'm going to give the slight edge to Max, and the reason being, Allen is without Le'Veon Bell and Jamal Charles. I think when those guys are healthy, I can see this team maybe climbing up the ranks, maybe. But because of that, I think there's more safe options in week one for Max, and gets a slight edge. I'll pick Max for this one. All right, guys, welcome back. Before I start with the next matchup, I just want to say that the 15th of September, I'm probably going to put an order in for the Lombardi trophy that we talked about before. So I'm going to order it, and we are chipping in $5. We all need a trophy. We need something here, guys, obviously, because we're so into it. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. So look forward to that. As far as everything else is concerned, let's break down this next matchup. Storyline here. These next two teams, it's been over 5 years maybe now. 5 years since these two have seen postseason fantasy football. It's been a lot of weeping and crying on the couch. These two are in the same division. They've been in the same division before in the past. And now they look to rebound and reclaim fantasy playoff potential. I give you Lewis versus Harsh. These two guys who are also in my division. This is a divisional matchup, and I must say that it is very interesting. Because if you look at the projections, which obviously don't mean jack shit, because sometimes quarterback numbers and defensive numbers kind of inflate the projections. But with that being said, you've got one team that is a classic setup team. You've got another team that, in my book, as I broke down in the draft podcast, has a lot of potential. And for the first time in his career, a lot of people have kind of really respected his draft. I don't know what else to say. But anyway, let's start with the matchups. Let's go to quarterbacks. We have Aaron Rodgers versus Derek Carr. Now, while I'm breaking down these head-to-head matchups with positions, I don't necessarily like to do that because a lot of other teams have their teams constructed a different way. But I'm just going to break it down by matchup and how I think they're playing it out. So Aaron Rodgers versus Derek Carr. Aaron Rodgers goes against Jacksonville. Derek Carr goes against New Orleans. Both of these guys will finish within the top 10 for week 1. No doubt about it. Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers are great options. Aaron Rodgers goes to Jacksonville and Carr on the road in New Orleans. I think both of these guys have potential to get 30 plus, because both those defenses are not that good. I still believe with Jordy Nelson in the lineup, Aaron Rodgers is going to rely on the arm. I see 3 touchdowns for Rodgers, and I see a potential of 3 for Derek Carr. If I give the slight edge to Rodgers, not by a lot. And what I mean by that is I think Aaron Rodgers has potential for a 30-point game. Derek Carr probably finishes with like 27-28. So it's going to be close. Therefore, you can give the slight edge to Rodgers if you want, but I don't think the quarterback play is a factor in this matchup. So I wouldn't look at that. Let's go to Lewis's team as his first 2 starting wide receivers, Dez Bryant and Allen Hurns. Dez Bryant with Dak Prescott throwing him the ball against the New York Giants. Well, I think this is going to be a game where Dez is targeted heavily. I also think that the Giants' defense is going to double team him a lot. Does it matter? Probably not. I think Dez Bryant, with Dak Prescott throwing him the ball, there's going to be a lot of shots down deep. And Dez Bryant's a guy who likes to beast over corners. He's going to love the fact that he's going to be going after the ball in a one-on-one situation, jump ball. He's going to love that. And he's going to tell him in the huddle, yo, throw me the ball. Probably going to happen, and Dez Bryant probably has one of those Dez Bryant-y games, because while, yes, Zeke Elliott, or if you want to go there, Alfred Morris might get a little bit of carries, not too much, but I can see this being a matchup-based game where Dez Bryant is going to want the ball, and he's going to bark in that rookie in his ear and say, yo, give me the ball. Dez Bryant is a very nice option. As for Allen Hurns, Allen Hurns, to me, falls under the category of guys who need a touchdown to be productive. I think if you look at last year, a lot of touchdowns for Allen Hurns. He did not wow everybody in the catching department. He was a deep threat. So, can he score a touchdown against Green Bay? Absolutely. I think Green Bay's defense is kind of soft. I mean, if you look at the forecast right now for rain, but that doesn't really factor in that much. So, Allen Hurns against Jacksonville, he's probably going to be lined up, going for a deep ball. He might have a touchdown. He's very hard to predict, which is why I think a lot of people were down on him this year. But this is a matchup where it's very possible to get a touchdown or two. On the other side, we have Jeremy Maclin and Demaryius Thomas. I got to say, I'm not huge on the matchup for both of these guys. Now, a lot of people talk about Jeremy Maclin being one of the safest wide receivers. That much is true. But how safe really is Jeremy Maclin? Because this is a game where they're at home against San Diego. I know Spencer Ware is probably going to be the lead dog in this one due to Jamal Charles' injury. Because of that, and that being said, Jeremy Maclin, I had him last year. If you look at the matchup, does Kansas City need him to win this game, or can they all outrun all over? I think it's a 50-50 toss-up here. I don't see Jeremy Maclin having a 20-point game. I think he's projected at 10 to 12. I think that's probably where he should be at in this one. Uh, he's probably going to get like 7 catches for like 80 yards or something like that. Let's go on and talk about Demaryius Thomas. This is a guy who everybody was terrified to take in the draft. Starts on Thursday night. Trevor Siemian throwing him the ball. Uh, this we don't know what's going to happen. I'm not even going to make a bold prediction. I know Carolina lost Norman. For those of you who still believe that Norman is that good, I don't know. Because of the uncertainty there, and because I like Des Bryant's matchup the best, I give the slight edge for the receiver department to Lewis in this one. Adrian Peterson and Carlos Hyde are Lewis's first two starting running backs, taking on David Johnson and Jeremy Langford. We have Lewis's team first. Adrian Peterson at Tennessee. Sean Hill is going to be the starter, not Sam Bradford, due to the trade. It doesn't even matter who the quarterback is. Adrian Peterson will find the end zone at least once in this game. You can put him down for at least 15 in my book. I know the Titans are a weird team because they have a lot of decent tools on defense. It's just that defense is very inconsistent. They could look respectable one week and then just horrible the next. This is also going to be an ugly game because of the rain, and it's just going to be really, really boring. With that being said, I like Peterson for at least 15. He definitely has potential to score at least 2 touchdowns in this one. Carlos Hyde, this is a guy I just wish it was on a better team because I'm not big on the 49ers. I know Chip Kelly is the quote-unquote RB whisperer because of his system and whatnot. Taking on the Rams, he's set for 12 points. This is another game which is just nobody's going to tune into this game unless you live in Los Angeles or San Fran. So I don't know how to predict Carlos Hyde. I think he's another guy who's very touchdown dependent. But the Rams are not a scary defense at all. Therefore, a touchdown is very possible if Carlos Hyde is cleared to play, by the way. Because if he's not, then that sucks double because Harsh has Sean Drone. Lewis does not. So, but if he is cleared, I think 12 to 15 is manageable. But it's very tough to predict with that offense. Let's turn over to Harsh. David Johnson and Jeremy Langford. Now, David Johnson is Arizona's running back. And when you go against New England, they try to take away the best player on the team. Well, who is the best player on Arizona? Because you can't cover John Brown because Fitzgerald will get his, Michael Floyd will get his, and you can't game plan to stop David Johnson because if that's the case, well, hey, we're going to just air it out on you guys. I think that Arizona definitely wins this game because they're home and because they're going to be up. I think David Johnson has a really big game here. I see he's projected at 15 right now on Yahoo standings. I'd probably give him even 15 to 20 range because I think that game, I wouldn't say get out of hand, but I think they're going to pound the rock with David Johnson. Jeremy Langford gets a boost with the signing of Josh Sitton, in my opinion. It bolstered their line. They're at Houston, though, and I think Chicago does not win this game. The Bears could be a really bad team. But I do see Jeremy Langford getting around 8 to 10 points. Because of both of those arguments being said, I think this matchup comes down to Carlos Hyde versus Jeremy Langford, and I really can't predict what's going to happen with both of them. I think this is an even draw at the running back spot because of Adrian Peterson and David Johnson both having good games. Let's go to the tight end positions. We have Travis Kelce versus Julius Thomas. While I think Julius Thomas is an interesting option, I'm going to tell you why I think Travis Kelce is a better play for this week. He's at home against San Diego. Now, San Diego lost Eric Weddle, which is a huge loss, excuse me, in covering the tight end. That leaves them with Jaleel Addae and Dwight Lowry. Dwight Lowry, believe it or not, has become a serviceable safety since switching over from corner when he was on the Jets. So maybe he can cover Travis Kelce, but I think that there's a guaranteed touchdown in this one for Travis Kelce. But Travis Kelce is not an elite tight end. I think I swung and missed on the hype on that one. I think he's just another guy, honestly, for tight end. He's a great athlete, don't get me wrong. But Julius Thomas against Green Bay or Travis Kelce against San Diego, I think both of them have good touchdown potential, but I'll give the slight edge to Kelce in this one. And the reason being, there's a lot of mouths to feed for Jacksonville and Green Bay, yeah, it's a decent matchup, but I think Bortles is going to have to rely on the run game as well as Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns in this one. So I give the slight edge to Travis Kelce. Flexes. Now, this is where things get interesting. We have Ryan Matthews and Tavon Austin for Lewis. I've said time and time again, Tavon Austin, you can never predict what the heck he's going to do. So for that, I'm not even going to break down Tavon Austin because he scores on punt returns, reverses, a quarterback pass, or like when he throws. Like, I don't know how to predict Tavon Austin at this point. So I'm just going to break down Ryan Matthews. Okay. So now he's expected to be this workhorse early down back, especially with Carson Wentz. I think there's a lot of carries. Cleveland's defense is nothing scary. Ryan Matthews has to get a touchdown, though, because he's going to be taken out on third downs with Darren Sproles. So the catching opportunities are very limited. So I think Ryan Matthews is a guy who probably gets you 8 points without a touchdown. I think he needs that touchdown, though. And Cleveland's not scary, so it is very possible. But even with that being said, I'm giving the slight edge here to Harsh in the flex category. Jarvis Landry and Danny Woodhead. You could flat out say, what? Jarvis Landry is against Seattle? Here's what I think is going to happen with Jarvis Landry. Miami is going to be behind a lot in this game, and they do not have good corners in the slot. If you guys want to replay that game against Pittsburgh where Marcus Wheaton torched them up, I'm not saying Jarvis Landry torches them up. However, I can see Jarvis Landry having like a 10-catch, 80-yard performance in this game. He's a PPR stud, and that's why. Speaking of PPR studs, Danny Woodhead. Look at the matchup. Is San Diego going to be behind or up in this game? Chances are they're going to be behind. And when they fall behind, I'm not saying they're going to abandon the run with Melvin Gordon, but there's going to be a lot of shotgun formations where Danny Woodhead is going to have a big, big role. So because of that, I think I'm giving the slight edge to Harsh in the flex department. So we have an even split at quarterbacks. I gave Lewis the wide receiver advantage. And it looks like we're tied because the running backs, it depends on those other two guys. So this is a very, very even matchup. Very even matchup. But it all comes down to who I'm actually going to pick in this one. Oh man, it's a tough one. It's a really, really tough decision, and because of that, I think I'm more inclined. Ooh man, I feel like there's a little bit. It's tough. I'd probably have to go slight edge. It's gonna be this is a tough one to call. I'd probably go with Harsh in this one, and the reason being I'm going with Harsh is probably because I think the game script for the flexes is the difference maker in this one. Because I think Landry has a big game because they're going to be behind so much, and Jarvis Landry gets most of his work in garbage time or catch-up time, whatever you want to call it. Danny Woodhead, on the other hand, he probably could have another decent game. I'm not going to say Woodhead gets a 20-point game, but I think the flexes make the biggest difference in this game because the quarterbacks are so neck and neck, and the wide receivers are edging to Lewis, but they're not that far off. Give me Harsh in this matchup. Welcome back to the Boss Number 2 podcast. Speaking of Boss Number 2, for those of you, we finally have a league logo picture of the boss, Mickey Rouse himself. So enjoy that for the time being. Anyway, let's break down this next matchup, which is our third matchup that I'm going to break down. We've got one player who's witnessed what a Super Bowl feels like, and he has come so close each and every time, and it always seems like his life revolves around third place games, which is unfortunate. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Bonney taking on a young gun in the league, somebody who was a late bloomer into the league. I believe he debuted the third season when this league was established, I believe. I could be wrong. Anyway, he made the playoffs one year, had a spectacular draft. After that draft, had a shitty draft. And now, if you're in on the hype, it looks like he has scored yet another spectacular draft. It's Andre Jones. So, let's break down the matchups. We got Drew Brees at home for Andre, taking on Blake Bortles at home against the Green Bay Packers. Now, again, I'm looking at the little cloud icon and I see some rain in Jacksonville doesn't really factor in though that much. I think Bortles, this is the game that scripts for the Jags to pass. I do see a few picks for Blake Bortles, so that not much of a cause of concern. Bortles is projected at 20. I see at least 20 to 23 points for Blake Bortles. Drew Brees at home against Oakland, though, is a juicy matchup. Because Brees is at home, he's a different person at home than he is on the road. And that doesn't change the fact, even though he got a little older, it's still Drew Brees at home. And this is not a scary matchup. I know a lot of people are big on the Oakland defense this year. That I don't see them getting all these signings and boom, the light bulb hits on within week one. This is another team like Jacksonville's D that's going to take some time to blend in a little bit. I'm giving the slight edge to Drew Brees on this one. I think Brees has potential to 25 to 30 points. And not saying that Bortles doesn't, but I think Bortles is a little bit more careless with the ball, and because I'm factoring interceptions, which is a little bit stupid, I'll be honest, but I think there's more. I like Brees at home. It's a safer pick. Start off with the wide receiver battle, which is extremely hard to predict right now. Rolling with Andre, who also went 0 RB in a way. Julio Jones and Alshon Jeffrey taking on Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson. This is a tough one because I think we'll start with Julio Jones. Obviously, Julio Jones is a top 3 wide receiver in the league, no doubt about it. But if you want to pull the history card, Tampa Bay has no answer to stop Julio Jones. He feasts against Tampa Bay. Matt Ryan, in my opinion, has one guy he can throw to. That is Julio Jones. I think Julio Jones has one of those games like he started out last season, like a big explosion game. I can see 20 plus points from Julio Jones in this one, so it's a great matchup. Alshon Jeffrey. Only one thing stops Alshon Jeffrey from performing, and that's a pulled hamstring while he's running a go or out. That's obviously something you have to factor into, especially because he came off of it last year. Who knows if it's still bothering him? But bottom line, he's going to get the volume in this one. At Houston, though, I don't know if he has one of those big games. I think you're looking at maybe 12 to 14 points from Alshon Jeffrey in this one. I don't know if he scores. It's always a possibility, but I just think that Houston is the place is going to be rocking. I'm not a big Houston fan at all, but I think that Chicago is going to be a little rusty going on the road. Let's talk about Brian's team. Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson. I love Allen Robinson this season. You can mark him down for a big game against probably they're going to match up Sam Shields. Sam Shields is pretty good, but I think one-on-one he tends to struggle a little bit. You can expect Bortles to chuck it up to Robinson. I could see him scoring in this one. I'd say Robinson is probably 15 to 20 points at this one. And then there's Keenan Allen. Again, like Alshon Jeffrey, health is a huge concern for Keenan Allen, but it's week one. At Kansas City, I mean, a lot of people are nervous because of Marcus Peters. I still think regardless of a corner that you put on Keenan Allen, he runs a lot of underneath stuff. And with that being said, I think there's a good PPR day for Keenan Allen. So I could see him getting potential to 12 to 13. The wide receivers here, it's tough to predict. It really is because I can see all these guys having serviceable games. And because I gave Andre the slight edge in a quarterback matchup, I really can't even give him another slight edge on this one, even though both of them are good. So I'm going to call in an even draw at the wide receiver position. Running back position, this is why I don't like to go head-to-head, seeing, who does he have at his running back position? Who do I have? Because, it's the way this team is constructed. DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry. You're going to play it conservative and safe and start with both of these guys. That's something that I kind of like, just not this week. I think Minnesota's defense is just very, very, very strong. And I'm not saying that because I have them, but it's a bad weather game that you're looking at. So both of these guys are going to get the rock. So because of that, I think they probably, at their upside, is combined for like 25 points. And then you have Thomas Rawls and Rashad Jennings. Rawls is going to be eased in. Rashad Jennings is the lead back right now, and it's against Dallas, which isn't a fright at all. I mean, he could have another decent week. Rashad Jennings, that is. Rawls, we don't know. It's saying that he's going to start. The projection is 15 carries. It's against Miami though. I think Rawls has a good week, and Rashad Jennings, you never know. But against Dallas, with Andre Williams finally cut, it looks like Jennings is going to be the goal line guy. He has goal line potential. Because of the conservative approach, and there's nothing wrong with it, but even with Rawls not healthy, if he suits up, I see a touchdown here. This is why I'm giving the running back edge to Brian. However, it's interesting because the guy he reached for in the 6th round is not in the starting lineup, and I want to elaborate on that a little bit as we go further down in this matchup. Tight ends, both of these guys are top 3 material. I give the edge to Brian only because Denver has played Greg Olsen in the Super Bowl. They shut him down with Talib. They took away Greg Olsen and forced Cam to throw to the smaller guys. I think the same rule applies here. And Jordan Reed against Pittsburgh is golden. That's money. So give me the matchup for Brian in the Jordan Reed category. However, when it comes to the flex positions, the zero RB theory again takes over on the way this team is constructed. Brandon Cooks, who has wide receiver 1 potential, and Michael Crabtree in a great matchup. Both these guys go against each other. Cooks and Crabtree are great options. I can't say the same for Emmanuel Sanders and Delaney Walker. We don't know what's going to happen with Denver, so I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, oh, it's a guarantee that Sanders or Demaryius Thomas. It wouldn't be fair if I said Demaryius Thomas wouldn't do shit and then say Emmanuel Sanders would, obviously. Delaney Walker against Minnesota really isn't that enticing of a matchup. I think Minnesota knows that this is going to be a run-first offense, and the mind of Mike Zimmer is probably going to have to take away Delaney Walker. He's probably going to have to say, you know what, what's the hype with Tajay Sharp and Rashard Matthews? Let's have those guys try to beat us. Let's take away Delaney Walker. I give the flex a landslide here. Big landslide to Andre. Obviously, I'm not going to go over defenses and kickers, although Denver's D is something you have to talk about. They might not win this game. I mean, they can. But they got to Cam last year. I think they're going to get to Cam this year. And Oakland in a shootout just isn't. Maybe this is a time where we have to start talking about the defenses. But I said I would talk about guys that I see on the bench that might have a good week. So let's break it down. Terrence West, I think, was a wasted waiver wire pickup move because I think he's just a short-term policy, and who knows what's going to happen. Theo Riddick, in a shootout game, he could have some serious numbers here. I mean, I don't see why not. It all depends on who do you think is going to be up. If you think Indianapolis is winning the game and you think Detroit's going to be behind, Riddick could have one of those games where he catches 8 passes. And then we have another guy I want to talk about that's probably sneaky, but is very risky to put him in week 1 again because this is week 1. People are under the philosophy, I've got to take the guys that I took earlier. But I'm just saying Will Fuller could be a sneaky play. You have to rely on a deep bomb touchdown, obviously. But he could be a little sneaky against the Bears. As far as Andre's roster is concerned, due to the fact that Justin Forsett got cut, got re-signed, we don't know. He has to play both of those other guys. If you're really ballsy, I think Ted Ginn could have a sneaky good matchup, but there's no way anybody's going to do that. Now it comes to my pick. I just think that even with the conservative running back approach, I'm going to have to go with Andre in this matchup because I do like the shootout potential with Brandon Cooks and Michael Crabtree. The flexes are the X factor here. I think there's a lot more needs to happen for Brian's team to win than Andre's. I think if Andre is to lose this game, it's probably because either Jeffrey got hurt or didn't perform his projections, and Thomas Rawls just looks like a stud for Brian. It's going to be a close one, though, but I think the flexes are the difference maker in this one, which leads me to believe that I'd probably take the slight edge on Andre. Again, just predictions that are not official. That's just the way I see it. Alrighty, welcome back, guys. We have a few more games to go down to. Let's break it down. Our 4th game of the week. This is what they call a revenge game. Last season, we had one team that everybody feared going into the playoffs. It was getting really, really hot. But their chances were ruined thanks to one man, bitch. That's right. The Fresh knocked off David ruin his playoff chances, and this game is going to be an ugly fight. I can say that much because David hasn't forgotten about that game. Let's break down the teams. Starting with the quarterback position, which is beautiful. Like, I'm looking at both of these matchups. It's just amazing. As Jay puts it, it's like getting a massage and a happy ending at the same time, bitch. Anyway, let's break it down. Russell Wilson at home versus Miami. Andrew Luck at home versus Detroit. I'm not even going to break down the matchups. We all know that they're beautiful. It's a draw. Russell Wilson is at home. Miami is just, ugh. Like, they have a lot of crap they need to figure out. But Andrew Luck in a shootout, and he is my number one ranked quarterback. But I think both of them are going to come close to the point total. So I'm not even going to break that down. Let's look at the first two wide receiver matchups here. We have Mike Evans and Randall Cobb taking on Eric Decker and Michael Floyd. Let's start with the J team. Mike Evans against the Atlanta Falcons. In the Dome, he's going to see a lot of Desmond Trufant. Now, I think Trufant is a great cornerback, but I could see him slipping up where Mike Evans has a decent game. Mike Evans is a target hog. He's a guy who definitely has top 10 wide receiver potential. Some people are trying to make the case that he's a top 5 wideout. I am not on that bandwagon at all. He's got top 10 potential. I think Mike Evans could have a decent game. Jameis is going to find him. He's going to find him early. I think he has a solid game. Randall Cobb against the Jaguars. Well, Jordy Nelson effect. If Jordy's there, Cobb is in the slot. I think that he racks up a lot of catches, which warrant him within that 12 to 14 range. So right off the bat, I can see very good matchups for both of these guys. Let's flip it over here to Eric Decker and Michael Floyd. Now, I talked about somebody else had an Arizona Cardinal player. I believe it was Harshard David Johnson, and I spoke about how the New England game plan is to take away the best option. Well, Arizona's got like 4. There's not one specific guy. And if it's up to me, it doesn't even matter what you're going to try to defend, like which guy. It's how are you going to defend it? Are you going to base your game plan stopping the run or stopping the pass? And I think that they're probably going to let David Johnson run through them and try to stop the aerial attack. With that being said, I'm going to get into a little bit. I feel like Floyd is the one guy who probably doesn't have that big of a game against New England because he's the touchdown guy. New England doesn't want to give up points, and he's a deep threat kind of a guy. So I think him and Brown, one of those guys is not going to produce. My money is on Floyd in this one, but I'll get back to something a little bit later. As far as Eric Decker is concerned, this is a guy who was like a touchdown machine, so consistent. Cincinnati is not a matchup you have to be afraid of. I think Decker, last year he was always like 12 to 15. I think he still produces a similar stat line. But with that being said, I like the Mike Evans matchup better than the Michael Floyd matchup, which gives me the slight edge to Jay, bitch. Yeah. Alright, let's break down the running backs. Another solid option here for Jay. We have Lamar Miller and Duke Johnson Jr. taking on Ezekiel Elliott and LaShawn McCoy. Now, as we all know, these lineups are not set in stone, so if there's anything on the bench that I think that these guys are thinking about or that I like, I'll certainly note that down. Lamar Miller at home against the Chicago Bears. Money. I think Lamar Miller definitely has a workhorse type of a game against the Chicago Bears. I think that the Texans are going to be up. Bill O'Brien's probably going to want to run the ball, so I like Lamar Miller a lot. Duke Johnson at Philadelphia. I don't know. Duke Johnson, I think, people were hyping him up like, oh yeah, he's going to be the new guy. He's going to be lead dog. But now Crowell's back in the picture. Duke Johnson, to me, I really don't know. I think Philly's a good against the run. However, this is a guy who's probably going to see a lot of catches out of the backfield because that's how they're trying to exploit Philly's interior line, is to probably get Duke Johnson in space. So maybe he has a decent game, but he's very, very unpredictable. So, which leads to Ezekiel Elliott and LaShawn McCoy. Well, David obviously went the running back route, so this is the strength of his team. I think Elliott and LaShawn McCoy both, and especially with Carlos Williams gone. LaShawn McCoy, for the time being, is probably going to be a goal line back. I think the Lamar Miller matchup is good, but I don't see it being enough to trample over the combo of Ezekiel Elliott and LaShawn McCoy. I think both Elliott and McCoy get at least in the mid-teens in this matchup. Therefore, I'm going with David. So we're going to break down the tight end matchup, which is a very, very unpredictable one. Dwayne Allen has a very, very nice matchup against the Detroit Lions, and Zach Ertz also has a nice matchup against the Cleveland Browns. Well, the script goes, young rookie quarterback, where's my tight end? I know Zach Ertz has always been hyped up. Dwayne Allen, I think, has to rely on a touchdown to get serviceable numbers. He's just a guy who relies on too many touchdowns. Zach Ertz, I think, can have a decent game without getting a touchdown because he can stretch the field. Not like Dwayne Allen. Dwayne Allen, I don't think, is that great of a field stretcher. But with that being said, unless Dwayne Allen was to get hurt, I think both these tight end lines are very, very close. So I'm going to have to say it's an even draw. And I mean, that's not saying much because it says 8-8 projection points with both of these guys. So there you have it. As I'm looking at the roster right now, we have, for Johnny's team for the time being, obviously this is subject to change, Julian Edelman and LeGarrette Blount taking on Latavius Murray and Larry Fitzgerald. Edelman probably still gets a lot of catches with Garoppolo. I think the system works, but I don't see a major big game out of Edelman. LeGarrette Blount is not a guy I would want to start, to be perfectly honest, at Arizona. I'm not huge on LeGarrette Blount in that matchup. But regardless, I think flex-wise, Latavius Murray, I think, has not a phenomenal game, but a really good game. I think Latavius Murray is a guy who does just enough to meet the projections. I think Murray gets something around like 15 to 16 points in that matchup at New Orleans. But I talked about the Arizona Cardinals. The one guy I can see having a really, really good game for PPR formats is Larry Fitzgerald. He's the guy who's going to work underneath. Belichick is not going to be worrying about what Fitzgerald does to him underneath until they get into the red zone. If you watch the way New England plays, they're going to give you those drag routes. They're going to give you those medium slants and post routes that go for at least like 20 yards. Nothing over the top, though. I think Larry Fitzgerald has a huge game. This is just a gut feeling, and it has nothing to do with who I want to win a matchup or anything like that. But I really think that Larry Fitzgerald, if he suits up, has a very, very, very solid game. So before I pick my winner, there are a few guys on the bench for Johnny's team that I want to look into just a little bit. Deshaun Jackson is going against a leaky Pittsburgh secondary. I would roll. This is my personal preference. Johnny, you can keep in your matchups all you want. I would throw in Deshaun Jackson against Pittsburgh. Kirk Cousins is at home. You like that? Well, I like that. I know that's fucking gay, but here. Yeah, I mean, Deshaun Jackson to me, I definitely play him over Blunt. And Gio Bernard and Duke Johnson, I think, are both in the same situation where they go against great run stuffers, but these teams are not good against backs out of the backfield. So it honestly is a gut feeling call between Duke Johnson and Gio Bernard. I would not start both of them, though. I think that having two Flory type of guys, unless you have elite wideouts all over the board, is really not that great of a look for a team. But that's just something to keep in mind. Both defenses, like I said, I don't need to talk about them because I think it'll probably be kind of even. Now, let's go to my projections. I think it comes down to what David's, if Floyd and Decker, mostly Decker though, I think if Decker has a decent day, I think that could really be the difference maker in this matchup. But regardless, I think the flex edge I definitely give to David because there's some uncertainty for now for Johnny. But I like what I'm seeing out of David's lineup. So my pick, I go with David. Not by a landslide though. It's going to be a close contested call. But I'm going to give him the slight edge. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to break down our second to last matchup. This is the fifth game of the week. Start with the storyline really quickly. Both of these men have experienced a championship. Both of these men have been to consistent playoff bouts. One of these guys has a streak that is going for 6 straight years in the playoffs. This other guy Some say it's maybe the temper that gets him really, really worked up and decides to say fuck everything. Both of these guys were the back-to-back champions. Paul, and then yours truly, the commish, in 2013 and in 2014. Excuse me. Is it 2012? Whatever. You know what I'm getting at. So this is a matchup. These two teams finally find themselves in the same division. It has never happened before with both of these teams. Obviously, when I'm going to break down my team, I'm not going to obviously say who I picked to win because, I mean, we're not going to do that over here. I'm just going to call what I see, how the teams are broken down, and from there, let's just get right into it with the quarterback matchup. Eli Manning and Matthew Stafford. I think both of them have tremendous matchups. I think Matt Stafford he definitely has top 10 potential this week. Eli Manning, maybe so. But I'm not even going to give the slight edge like Stafford because that's very, very biased. For right now, these guys are very, very similar. The matchup definitely without Vontae Davis, though, makes Matt Stafford a great play this week. But with that being aside, I'm not going to call any quarterback matchup what I think is going to happen because Eli Manning has every right to put up the same numbers as Matthew Stafford. I'm going to leave it at that. So we next have two wide receiver battles. Antonio Brown and T.Y. Hilton taking on DeAndre Hopkins and Vincent Jackson. Obviously, with the way my team is constructed, the head-to-head matchups are a little skewed because of how I drafted. But let's go into this right now. Antonio Brown, he's a stud. DeAndre Hopkins, he's a stud. Anybody else object? No, not really. But I think with return yards and everything else, I think Brown has the slight edge. Maybe, but not that much. But anyway, it doesn't matter because I think when we're looking at Vincent Jackson now, Vincent Jackson is a guy who's getting up there in age. And I think at this point, he's going to be utilized. He's going to be taken out in packages. I think he's now up to the point, if you remember 2 or 3 years ago, how Atlanta was utilizing Roddy White. I think that's the potential that Vincent Jackson has. But at the same time, because if you remember, Roddy White was kind of only productive when he got touchdowns. Same can be said for Vincent Jackson. I think he needs a touchdown to be very, very serviceable. So if Paul thinks he's going to get a touchdown, be my guest. Throw him in there. I don't know if I necessarily... I'm not going to say that I don't see it, because everybody has a chance to get a touchdown if you break it down. But the matchup itself isn't that frightening. It's just a matter of if Vincent Jackson can run a route. That's pretty much what it comes down to. But T.Y. Hilton and Dante Moncrief are both going to ball out in this game in the Dome. So I'm going to give the receiver edge, slight edge to me. But this is why I said the head-to-head shit. It's not really what we need to be looking at. Melvin Gordon and Bilal Powell taking on C.J. Anderson and Doug Martin. You don't even need to break down anything. I'm not even going to make the case for anything. I'm not even going to be biased. Give the edge to Paul. C.J. Anderson, the game script fits to him getting a lot of carries, but he's going to need to find one big run to break loose because it could get ugly against the Carolina Panthers. Doug Martin, I think Doug Martin's another guy, though, that needs a touchdown to produce because the emergence of Charles Sims in the backfield, Doug Martin's not what he was his rookie year where he was piling up catch after catch after catch. He's ceded that role to Charles Sims. So I think Doug Martin and C.J. Anderson, I think if they get touchdowns, Paul's looking in a great spot. If not, I think they both get warranted around 10 points. Melvin Gordon right now is the starter, and my lineup is not set. I could probably go T.J. Yeldon, Darren Sproles. I don't know, but I'm going to go with the guy who's starting as of right now and has gained confidence in Melvin Gordon. Obviously, with Melvin Gordon, it's not going to be sexy in this matchup against Kansas City. But 8 to 10 is very, very serviceable, so that's what I would be looking at here. Bilal Powell, on the other hand, also in a split committee. He's going to get a lot of catches. I don't know how much in this game, so it's not set in stone yet. But it doesn't matter who my RB2 is. You give the slight edge to Paul. Tight end situation. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to probably look to Rob Gronkowski, so maybe he does well, or maybe the defense just knows where Garoppolo is going. I don't know, but bottom line is it's Gronk. I give him the slight edge over Barnage, and it is subject to change. It could be Antonio Gates, but you got to respect Gronk, even with a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'm going to go there. I don't see Gronk having Gronk numbers, but he'll have serviceable numbers to get by. Flexes, we have 0 RB status. Sammy Watkins and Marvin Jones taking on Willie Snead and D'Angelo Williams. Ever since the news came out that Vontae Davis was officially out, I jumped out of my seat and I was just like, I could see Marvin Jones catching a deep bomb over the defense. It's one of those gut feelings that I have. I'm not down on Doug Baldwin at all, but I think the matchups with these guys is so much better than Baldwin. Sammy Watkins is healthy. He's against a Baltimore secondary that was very leaky last year. We don't know if it's going to be the same this year. But in all due respect, we'll play with Paul. D'Angelo Williams is going to be a workhorse. Now, he's projected at 18. I am not going to say that he gets 18, but it is going to be very respectable low-end RB1 numbers. I'll say something around 12 to 15. Willie Snead is not a bad matchup at all. But I just think that the firepower with the receivers might give myself a slight edge there, not by a lot. Kickers, I don't have one yet. I'm not going to talk about it. Minnesota taking on Tennessee. If they stop the run, this defense will be fine. And Cincinnati against the Jets, it's pretty much a toss-up. You don't know what's going to happen. I think Cincinnati would look really nice by getting some Fitzpatrick picks, which is very possible. So with this matchup, obviously I'm not going to call the matchup because it's not what I do. Obviously you want your team to win. I'm not going to call it. I'm not going to jinx anything. You know how it is. But what I will say about this matchup is that it is going to be very interesting because there are two teams that are constructed differently. You have someone with an elite tight end, an elite wide receiver, and you have running backs that aren't great for PPR, but they still get the job done in a PPR versus the zero RB team. So let's see if the hype is true with both of these teams. I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more game to match up, predict. Alrighty then, welcome back. We are now down to the last matchup. And insert Rob Messi a voice clip here because looks like we got some bad blood in here. The rematch of last year's Super Bowl. Somebody has still not gotten over it. Tried to make history by winning back-to-back championships and getting 2 rings, but was stopped by none other than Matthew Morris? And everybody's puzzled. Like, the guy who took Jason Witten in the 3rd? But ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Morris has a ring. He has established himself as a threat. And the boss number 2. Fantasy League. So, that being said, there's only one thing on this game, and that's revenge and some bad blood in here. Let's go out with the teams, the matchups. Cam Newton taking on Denver. Tyrod Taylor taking on Baltimore. Well, if you think what happened last year in the Super Bowl is going to stay, well, Cam Newton is going to be a dud this week. Like I said, these aren't set in stone. I don't know how well Cam Newton would produce at Denver, but the 23 projected points, I'm taking the under on that one. I don't see Cam having a Cam-esque game against this defense, but I wouldn't say it's total dud. I think if Cam Newton was to produce, I'd say it's probably around the 17-point range. Let's talk about Tyrod Taylor, though, on the other hand. I guess the projection for Dak Prescott went down, but regardless, you can't roll out a rookie week 1, although compulsive gambler might rethink that. I mean, I'm not trying to put anything in your mind, but I did the same thing when RG3 was a rookie, but obviously he was a first-round pick, so not that much risk involved when I did that. But regardless, Tyrod Taylor's going to be perfectly fine. This is a matchup against the Baltimore Ravens where there's going to be a lot of run plays that'll set up the pass to guys like Watkins, Clay, maybe even Robert Woods. I mean, that's a deep sleeper, but it could happen. So Tyrod Taylor at Baltimore, I give the edge in the quarterback to Coffee on this one. We got Brandon Marshall and A.J. Green taking on Amari Cooper and Odell Beckham Jr. Now, these are both great matchups, but I got to say one thing. I'll start with Amari Cooper on Rob's side against New Orleans. I think that's money. You play Cooper. I think with a touchdown, I could see Cooper getting around 18 points. AJ Green is the new, everybody predicts Julio Jones numbers out of him. I don't know, but the matchup is really, really nice against the Jets. Darrelle Revis can't stop anybody, and if Darrelle Revis does stop AJ Green, I don't think it's that Revis is back. I just think that AJ Green is not worth all the hype. So let's see if he can live up to it in week one, because they're going to move AJ Green all over the place, just like they did Julio Jones. That's what everybody is saying. Brandon Marshall against Cincy is a nice matchup. Odell Beckham Jr. against Dallas, historically, hasn't been that great against Dallas other than the one-handed catch that he had. Regardless, though, I'm not even looking at that. Again, this is a very tough call between these two guys. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to give the slight edge to Mr. Rob Coffey. And the reason being is I like the Amari Cooper matchup. I think that's a deep bomb waiting to happen in that game. I think Marshall will get his. I think Green will get his. But I think if Cooper's hitting and Beckham hits, it's going to be a nice week for this guy. We'll go to the running back position. By the way, backtracking off of that, it could be very even. I just think if Cooper does hit, I'll give it to Coffey. Well, I can't even say that because I'm not going to just judge off of what happens in the game, but I think it relies on Amari Cooper hitting, but the matchup to me looks like it could hit. That's why I'm taking him barely, though, not by a lot. Eddie Lacy and Chris Ivory taking on Devonta Freeman and Spencer Ware. Well, you just got a lottery ticket here when Jamal Charles is not being suited up to play. Ware is a very talented back. And Devonta Freeman and Eddie Lacy could have a good game against Jacksonville, but look no further. I think the running back argument here is set. Honestly, with the tight end situation, Colby Fleener and Virgil Green, I, for one, am not a Colby Fleener guy at all. And against Oakland, remember last year, the tight ends, they're probably going to fix it, though. It's very rarely that a team, when they sucked so bad the year before, doesn't do anything about it the next season. So I expect, what team? Oakland to brush things up. And Colby Fleener has not looked good. Virgil Green, a young quarterback tight end, maybe he's pretty decent. But I don't see any great potential from both of these guys, and I am not a Colby Fleener fan. Virgil Green, you never know in this matchup. I mean, anything could happen. But give me a draw here, and this is more because I'm not a Colby Fleener guy, and it's a little bit biased, but that's probably why I said that. All right. Well, Corey Coleman and Frank Gore taking on John Brown and Tyler Lockett. Okay, here's what I'm going to say with this. I will guarantee that a Browns receiver will catch a touchdown against the Eagles secondary. If Robert Griffin III is on point, maybe it's 2. I just don't know if it's going to be Coleman or Terrell Pryor, because the script fits both of them to go deep down the field. I could see Pryor catching a touchdown. Barnage is always a possibility as well. Corey Coleman, though, looks like he's locked in for wide receiver 1 work against this secondary. You know what? Give me Corey Coleman in that. That's a nice matchup right there, so I'm not even going to argue that. But here's where things get a little ugh. Frank Gore, probably the one starting running back nobody wants on a fantasy team. But you can't deny the value of where he got him at. But I just think that Frank Gore, man, the time is ticking. Even in a good matchup against Detroit, this is something you want the passing attack involved in, not the ground game. So I'm not that big on it. John Brown and Tyler Lockett, like I said, I think John Brown or Michael Floyd, I think one of them has the dud game against New England. I said before, I think it's Michael Floyd. So if I'm going to go off of that statement alone, I think John Brown probably has a decent week. Not a crazy 20-point game like he had sometimes, but I can see him warranting around between 10 and 15. You just can't predict Arizona on a day-to-day basis. I think Fitzgerald's the guy I'm really big on, though, in this one. And last but not least, we have Tyler Lockett. Without even factoring in return yards, I do believe that Tyler Lockett scores in this one. I believe Lockett, Baldwin, and you know what? I'll even go out on a limb and say Thomas Rawls. I think those 3 get touchdowns in this one. I think Baldwin over the middle, I don't see anybody guarding him. But Tyler Lockett is that secret weapon guy where, he comes in and they're going to throw a bomb to him. I can see him catching a long one in this one. So there, again, it's almost a clean sweep. Is it going to happen? No, I can't do that to you, champ, because that Seattle defense might be the difference maker in this one. Okay, maybe not the difference maker, but great matchup against Miami. You're going to see a lot of turnovers. They're at home. That stadium is going to be rocking. This is why we're breaking down defenses, only because there's an elite defense on the board, so you have to talk about it. Seattle's D, I can see with the turnover potential, they might get you 20 plus. And Rob Coffey knows if this kid wins again due to some defense, hey, defense wins championships, Coffey. Nah, who knows? Tennessee against Minnesota. I respect the move. I respect the move. I mean, I like the Titans defense, but I just think that this is, if it's going to be a turnover, I think it's going to be like a fumble. I don't see anything or anybody taking anything back from the house. I think it's just a very boring game. Uh, Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, my final prediction for this one, the revenge game is in effect. Give me Rob Coffey in this one. Obviously, it's a little subject to change. You know, Matt's probably going to go with Cam Newton. Maybe not, but I don't even know what options are out there right now that you could feel even confident starting over a guy like Cam Newton because he's that elite. So maybe because it's week one, Matt says, you know what, fuck all you guys. I'm going to prove you guys wrong, and Cam's going to get 45 points. Maybe not against Denver, but hey. So, once again, Rob Coffey is the guy I'm going to take in this one. Well, that wraps it up for the week one projections. I know it's a little early, but I was really bored, so I decided to do it. Anyway, next thing I want to talk to you guys about is that the Power Rankings podcast comes at once every other week. Also, if you guys want to come for a podcast like an interview just to talk about how your team is constructed, podcast will be done Wednesday nights. So if you guys are not doing anything and you hit me up in advance and want to get on a podcast and get your thoughts in, or maybe I have a segment that you guys want to be a part of, Power Rankings, we can do it together as a whole, and then I can make the podcast and we can all put our 2 cents in. Let me know and get back to me on the Lombardi trophy that I told you guys. I'll post a picture of what I think is going to be good. Thank you guys.